I've been holding back a lot. And the reason I've been holding back a lot is just simply because I don't want to turn off a lot of my fans, man. I mix the medicine with the food.
Greetings and welcome to Ancient Library and Tome 34, a quick video in which I will break down modern ufology with the experience, reflections, and knowledge I've obtained while maneuvering through the field for the last couple of years. Based on those insights, I've come to the conclusion that ufology like we know it will disappear and transform, but more on that later. First of all, before we dive into the ufology field, let's talk about hidden truths. Hidden truths are secrets, things which, if unraveled and uncovered from lies, will shock the state of mind of the masses and challenge the status quo. Most of the time, such things are protected by the measure of plausible deniability, and therefore, individual responsibility is lost in the process. Here are some examples of things I personally would define as hidden truths. The CIA has conducted many questionable operations in the past, and they never stopped doing those. So we can assume today many operations the public would deem critical are running right now as we speak. A certain virus, which was spreading all over the globe, originated in a lab. Our eyes only perceive a small fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum, not more than 0.5%, known as visible light. So we are actually collectively blind. Hidden criminal networks like the one which was seemingly controlled by Jeffrey Epstein are still operating after his alleged death, putting him in a place as a lone scapegoat and a limited hangout. The pharmaceutical sector keeps you sick and unhealthy to generate more revenue from treatment cycles and further therapy. Heaven and hell are created by humans to empower themselves and control religious and faithful people. Many of these things started out as straight-out lunacy and conspiracy theories, but as you may recognize, many of the conspiracies from yesterday are the truths from today. And early stigmatization is the price people pay for thinking ahead of the masses. So let's take a look at the ufology landscape and start with the actual subject of this rather compact and dense program. So now I will run down the layers of ufology, starting with the substantial essence of the field, which are UFO cases and ET contact cases. So there are several types of UFO cases I've come across. International non-US cases like, for example, Virginia, Brazil, and the aerial school sighting and contact in Zimbabwe. Domestic US cases like, for example, Betty and Barney Hill, the Chris Bledsoe case, and of course the Roswell UFO crash in 1947. Government ufology. US domestic or international cases or intelligence brought forward most of the time by ex-government whistleblowers like David Grush, Louis Elizondo, and the Skywatcher program. Also including recent government hearings and most of the military-heavy claims which got covered in the 2017 New York Times article. The reason I'm specifically highlighting US domestic cases is the huge apparatus of deep state which gets used prominently in the US to conceal secrets and maintain plausible deniability via the military-industrial complex. Not only on UFO-related subjects, but probably all types of controversial areas. Since many other huge countries or players on the world map are not existing in the same type of open society or government structure, speaking of Russia and China, where we haven't any data or nice graphs showing us numbers for UFO cases, but they surely got a certain amount of unpublicized UFO activity. Furthermore, I think all UFO cases can be defined and put in 3 categories, naming them here without listing concrete examples. Category 1. Potential genuine cases of the first order, I would say. No government activity involved, seemingly, but potential for counter-intel operation to protect or steer the desired narrative and create stigma and disinfo to discredit potential genuine cases. Category 2. Potentially artificially created cases for entertainment value or monetized programs, also including classical psyops and TV series like The Skinwalker Ranch and things like cattle mutilations and abductions. Could be government hoaxes conducted with the use of secret exotic technology like microwave weaponry, light projections and holograms, and fake UFOs and crafts. Category 3. Potential hoaxes of individual origin. Charlatans, fiction writers, narcissistic labs with no government or intel involvement. Besides maybe pushing these false cases to increase noise and therefore the noise to signal ratio. So since I'm trying to avoid to name specific cases here apart from necessary examples, you can think for yourself here and name the cases you are familiar with and put them into different categories. So what are the core areas of ufology and what branches are connected to this rather mysterious and still highly stigmatized field of research? UFO Physics, the UFO tech connection. So first of all, the practical part, funneling in theories which cover attempts to master things like anti-gravity or gravitic propulsion devices, which is one type of approach to build or reverse engineer propulsion systems far ahead of the ones we are currently using. Covering theories which in the end should allow the pilot to reduce light years of distance in between habitable planets to actionable, conductable travel distances. One if not the most logical approach and reason for advanced ETs to appear in our vicinity. We won't be the visitor, at least for the foreseeable future. UFOs and extrasensory perception, the psychic and supernatural connection. Is the general connection between the UFO field and things like telepathy, which is most likely used in ET contact cases for communication. Remote viewing and telepathy-related subject area were pushed and intertwined with the ufology field in the last years. And back to the CIA operations and things like MKUltra, which seem to be an at least adjacent neighboring area of subject to ufology in current days. Could also allude to a potential hidden truth of advanced aliens having the ability to use their mind in a more powerful, manifesting way than we are currently able. What a surprise. UFOs and religion. Terrestrial, spiritual and religious concepts embedding the phenomena. The rationalization of anything higher which manifests itself with religious contents and history. A basic example would be seeing a UFO and thinking it must be the return of Jesus Christ. The effort in attempts to connect religion, especially Christianity, with cases like Chris Bledsoe or the fan favorite Tim Taylor, who is allegedly performing all types of magical rituals, just like Chris Bledsoe, whose UFO story seems strongly aligned with his religious beliefs, and the aliens seem to like it and play into it. I'm trying to not name many precise examples to operate as neutral as possible, but sometimes this is not avoidable. And the general notion that aliens are angels and demons, and not the other way around, which would make the most sense for everybody but strongly religious people, using ufology-related contact and cases as a hook or ramp to funnel the deeper questions and higher meanings into religious concepts, especially in Christianity. Pure ufology, theoretical approaches and deep philosophical questions. I call it that way because it's only connected to the theoretical questions and approaches, free from evidence and the material boundaries, more consistent in thought experiments and the exploration of questions like what happens after the first open contact of two intelligent races, and the potential traits and shareable cultural things and teachable spiritual aspects, or the access to accelerating knowledge and potential rules in a crowded intelligent universe. One of my favorite areas in the field. The ufology business niche. Using the field for business, tainting it with bad actors. Not necessarily everyone who makes money in the field is a bad actor. A seemingly natural process on our world to make a business out of everything, also including real potential truth seekers who want to get paid while looking for these secrets. But I want to also mention that using ufology and people asking UFO related questions for monetary gains could be a double-edged sword. And I will elaborate more on that later, but pure motivation and dependence on money to produce UFO-related content really does conflict with genuine truth-seeking. For example, even if you were exposed to 100% of the UFO secrets, the weekly uploads could not stop to create money and increase the rate of noise to signal, which equals a never-ending bait for disclosure. So in a reverse sense, everyone who is solely motivated to make money in this field will not stop spamming you with nonsense, even if they were previewed to the real truth, ergo disclosure, on a personal basis. UFO debunking. So in a field where nothing is really clear and the government is chronically mistrusted, for valid reasons, it's almost bound to happen, the emerging of the so-called debunkers. And first of all, I want to say that is a good thing, because we need a good chunk of critical people to equal and balance the scale of quite a few people who believe anything they hear and see. After watching a 10-second AI-generated video, for example, and people who fall victim to engaged fiction writers or UFO booksellers who use the mystery of the UFO field for their own gains, not for the collective process of acquiring truths for the progression of our whole civilization. Researching and more so debunking a UFO case comes with some special circumstances. For example, a psychological dynamic in which the natural path of reasoning gets influenced just by the quality of the debated subject. In other words, almost every scenario or situation is more likely to happen as aliens visiting Earth and UFOs flying around. So we can call it a bias against highly unlikely things. Stigmatization based on acclimatization of the status quo. Not to forget though, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Idealistic debunking and the Greer effect. There are also some idealistic debunkers out there who attack any case or person connected to it, sometimes even recreating the sighting with flares or models to create a debunk, leaving some critics and stern skeptics ironically conducting super fan behavior and potentially investing hundreds of hours of work in things like building models, which may just manifest their own personal battle with ontological shock, and thoughts like, I believe in aliens and UFOs, but not this guy. Or of course paid work hours to manufacture debunks for counter-intel operations and narrative control, just showing all possibilities here. Recreating basic elements of a UFO sighting, I call it the Greer effect, because Stephen Greer allegedly produced UFO sightings via the CE5 remote viewing protocol, filming simple flashes of light and light orb appearances over the horizon, leading to debunkers firing flares in the sky to recreate the scenario. It's basically claiming to debunk the whole case by recreating partial basic elements, equals, I will call it, the Greer effect. To highlight unnatural debunking efforts and pseudo-logical patterns which more reflect an internal battle with personal ontological shock, reflected in some kind of manic, idealistic debunking behavior. It's not against skeptical people, but there are layers to the area of debunking. It could in theory be used as a tool to ironically discredit potential genuine cases. UFO debunkers who want to get taken seriously have a high bar to reach, with information of such a high magnitude and potentially ontological shocking truths, and working with material or data which potentially wasn't reviewed to a deeper extent because a personal rationalization took place, ending up in something which could be labeled a biased debunk, resulting in outright disinfo. I want to also add that I'm not judging the genuinity of the Greer stuff, but highlighting the process of imitating, recreating simple things like lights and flashes for a few seconds doesn't debunk anything. And in my opinion, debunkers who waste multiple hundred hours in attempts to recreate a mundane, low bandwidth sighting are maybe just exposing themselves and their battle with reality. So to visualize some of the aforementioned aspects, I want to show something here. Imagine a spectrum reflecting the ontological shock or belief in UFOs. On the far right, we got the idealistic debunker, and on the far left, we got the blind believing cult member. Imagine another spectrum which shows the personal attraction to real truth. On the far right, we got the greedy content creator who only serves the curiosity of the field for money, and on the far left, we got the pure truth seeker, not wanting to be in a position to be sold anything. I think sometimes it's important to zoom out and look at the whole spectrum of happenings, especially in ufology, because it's so polarizing. There are people who believe in everything and there are people who are against everything. And the truth, most likely, is somewhere in between. So you can put yourself on these spectrums and zoom out and see where you are really located in the field. What does evidence really mean in ufology? Not really much. In a system full of potential lies and manipulation, Occam's razor doesn't really work. If there's a desired narrative which gets protected, who can you really trust? If there's a potential genuine case with existing evidence which would offend the desired narrative of the deep state, a designed debunk, ergo disinformation, would be created, transforming the potential genuine case into noise for the normal observer. For those who may have found the truth, maybe even in the process of analyzing evidence, the non-expert is quick to label those people something to the effect of a cult member, because they seem to be too much into it, usually a state which gets stigmatized, even today, in mainstream circles. I already conducted a thought experiment reflecting a scenario in which one has a genuine UFO sighting, or ET interaction, or maybe even hard evidence. If you put yourself in the shoes of somebody in that situation, you will figure out quickly that that isn't a desirable state of being. The video is called Layers of Counterintelligence and is linked below. What if you come to a positive conclusion regarding a UFO case? Like I just mentioned, if you move yourself on the aforementioned spectrum, you have to be ready for repelling effects while challenging the status quo, especially in such a potentially worldview-changing field like ufology, with very intense implications, especially for the nowadays even more controversial power structure and the deep state, and global, I will label it, politics. It would be great if we live in a world in which truth is laying on the table, free for everyone to see, but unfortunately that's not the reality we are operating in. I think it's important to keep an open mind, even if there seemingly is evidence for or against a certain case. There could still be active shenanigans from both directions involved, because the designers, hoaxers, or counter-intel operatives these days know that UFO evidence seems like the holy grail of optics shift or smoking gun for a case, in an area with potential global implications. Also in smaller echo chambers like the already mentioned UFO and Christianity stuff, or UFO Physics enthusiasts. Trashy ufology and blind belief. Speaking of quality cases, the exact opposite side of the spectrum here is something I call trashy ufology. Even for the very open-minded but also critical individual, it's a bit too much to be taken seriously. And like I also said, I don't like to call names and bring named examples, but I think the channel Third Phase of Moon is a quite good match to be a good example, unfortunately. This channel, if active, uploads every day and reflects a perfect example of a YouTube creator who fully operates in faith of the monetized YouTube content creator business niche, which I mentioned at the beginning. They are putting 90% false and fake but visual appealing content into their videos and milk every interaction, and the main points of motivation is to get the maximum exposure and money for low quality videos, paired with dramatic comments and reactions, but straight up using rendered or AI generated UFO footage in their video which they claim to be real recordings. Maybe they once started this with the right intent, but transformed into a machinery of UFO noise content, trying to surf the hype which is present in the field, most of the time initiated through government ufology. Even if they have some real stuff in there once in a while, the motivation and premise on how to curate and publish their content is clear and produces more harm than good for the field, at least in my opinion. The future outlook. So for the present and future of the field in general, I think there are some things to mention. I think the golden age of ufology as we know it is over. At least the part which is based on media, especially in form of UFO or ET pictures and videos. And you may guess why that is the case. And the answer is better tech, precisely artificial intelligence, and things like generative AI. And if we go back at the start of the video where I mentioned some things about hidden truths and secrets, another one is the fact that the classified world and black tech think tanks and the executing companies are having at least several decades better technology than accessible to the broad public. So you can extrapolate the technological possibilities which are given to the deep state, at least in theory, to deceive our rather primitive base senses like eyes and ears. And we even got the US president out here disclosing classified tech purely out of personal ego and hubris. So considering the fact that these types of directed energy weapons are rather old news, you can assume what else they might got in store for all kinds of shenanigans. Also giving a lot of potential for plausible deniability. Of to name an example, things like weather weapons, which in the mainstream perception would be labeled outright magic, giving additional stealth capabilities to use these types of things today and in the near future. I also want to mention that if there is an advanced, benevolent alien race which wanted to make contact and transmit whatever message to us, would have done it by now. Aligning with the, in my opinion, logical extrapolation that advanced intelligences possess the ability to predict the future, at least to a certain degree. Knowing that, for example, if they created a case via human interaction, an ET contact case, they should have done it until now. Knowing that our near future tech level is prohibiting us in some paradox way to get to the real truth. We won't be able to discern AI-generated videos from potential real UFO recordings. In other words, they carefully would pick the time frame which would be somewhat optimal, a transformative point in time, which we seemingly experience right now. Of course, this is just my opinion. And there are many other elements in ufology which could initiate sightings or cases, without the implication of long-lasting humanitarian missions on planet Earth. I also hope that if there is a vast but crowded universe out there, that there are some written or unwritten rules to not interact and disturb the evolution of intelligent life to a certain point. And nobody really knows if we already reached this point in secret. Because in a world where free will is honored, the decision should be on our side. Who is we? Would be the next question. And we will speak about that in another video. Ufology will transform and split up. I know many people who are active in the UFO field are having a similar experience or thought process. The process of zooming out and try to grasp the bigger picture, and the reoccurring general question, are UFOs and ETs real, or is it all just noise? It's always an internal battle of a huge upcoming revelation, of the acceptance and interaction with advanced, intelligent life in the universe, always combined with a huge downer for human hubris, and the realization that mankind isn't the greatest and smartest thing the universe has created. A thing which especially challenges two groups of people, egomaniac narcissists and deep religious believers. Two groups of people which hold great power over this current world and the status quo. Furthermore, what happens if the general truth of an ET contact came out tomorrow? Legal, accepted knowledge. The field of ufology as we know it, which is based on that question, would be solved. UFO just means unidentified flying object, and the general question of the existence of other intelligent life would be answered. The missing variable, at least one of them, is identified, and content creators which are only in for the money need to change their niche because the truth is out there. And there's no need for more noise, which only functions on the base question, which is now answered. Genuine, enthusiastic truth seekers will evolve with the field and find their niche, which goes in hand with the evolution of concentrated interest in previous aspects of ufology, some of which I've labeled in this video. But content with titles like "Is there other life out there?" will not run anymore in the algorithm. If we go a little further here, we can say that additionally, the ETs which are in contact with our civilization could transmit loads of new and previously unreachable important information, which could lead to a cleaning effect via exposing fake intel and corroborating true information in regards to subjects like, for example, UFO physics, creation of the universe, the real history of planet Earth, other intelligent life in the cosmos, and more exotic, I would say, terrestrial data points like who built the pyramids, or questions about the Bermuda Triangle, the Tunguska impact event, or the Roswell UFO incident. And also debunking false contactees and hoaxes, for example. You get the point. To close this out, I want to say something general, not necessarily connected to UFOs. A few days ago, a new batch of the Epstein files were released. And without going into details, if you're in the position of total astonishment and surprise, and you think about the people which told you all that years ago, labeled in a framework of a conspiracy theory, maybe go to them and ask them about similar things. We got thinkers and we got makers, and I think the perfect synergy and harmony with these two types can bring great knowledge and a life which resonates truth in these dark times. At the beginning of the video I mentioned hidden truths, and the word truth implies an element of real genuinity, which is hard to determine early and easy to determine later. If these Epstein files are real and everything in them is real, we can assume that there are also things on a level of deep military underground bases, active, illegal and sinister CIA operations, advanced tech isolated from the public and open markets, and maybe even ufology related information. The last thought or question I want to mention at this point is if all these sinister things are just a product of terrestrial human evil and degeneration, we have to clean our shit up on this planet. And the process of healing maybe starts with these revelations. Also, keeping in mind the crazy amount of attention this file drop creates, which could be the motive for the convenient circumstance that the US government is dropping these files right now. The effects created by this huge file dump are not really positive in a spiritual sense, so the future will show if it's really a painful healing process or just a painful psyop or misdirection from real secrets and hidden truths. If this drop really was initiated in a genuine and clear-hearted way, potentially a God's gift, or maybe a gift ETs provided to turn things around on this world, to end this program on a positive, hopeful, but also very naive note. In a perfect world, or a perfect cosmos, we don't need advanced ETs to help us. My motivation in this field is more to reach a state on which we are able to join the club of intelligent life in the universe and communicate and exchange all kinds of things and expand our horizon in any imaginable sense and unlock the next level. Libra.
The Epstein files, why it's so frustrating is it's exposing a justice system that has two different classes. For the weak, you have laws that bind but don't protect. For the powerful, you have laws that protect and do not bind. I mean, do you agree this is what we're seeing with the Epstein files?
Yes, it's two tiers of justice in America. That's why I came up with the term Epstein class. If you're part of this rich, powerful club, then you feel like you're above the law.
So like if you were on the scene and you were powerful, like to be honest, like if you're not in those files, it would be an insult. Because it just means that you were a bit of a loser.